I sort of pity the students that Bart Ehrman has in his classes because he teaches classes on religion and he's an atheist, and his interpretations are consistent with his ways to interpret when he was a fundamentalist Christian. So Bart Ehrman is a professor up at the University of North Carolina. He teaches classes that have to do with the New Testament, and his interpretations of the Gospels are flawed, as we're going to hear here. And we're going to take a look at that now. Now, he's here with Megan Lewis. We'll listen to a portion of this video. So you've come to the right place. It's S.J. Thomason, where truth matters, at Christian-apologist.com. Thank you.
Makes the New Testament accounts different is that Mary has never had sex, and the accounts of her having birth are not explicit about. It's not that God becomes a human and has sex with her, and so it's different in that sense. From
he doesn't like turn into a swan or a bull.
He doesn't turn into a swan, a bull, or in the appearance of her husband, as happens in Greek and Roman myth.
So that's one thing that we can talk about. Mary was overshadowed by the Holy Spirit. And in fact, what's really neat about that is we have a very similar situation that occurred in 2 Samuel in the Old Testament about overshadowing with the Ark of the Covenant, because Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant. Really exciting stuff. So here we go.
So do all of the canonical Gospels show her as being a virgin, or is this restricted to one or two accounts?
Yeah, well, this is one of the really interesting things is you get the virgin birth story in both Matthew and Luke. Their stories of how it happens are quite different from each other. People don't realize this because, we're used to thinking of the Christmas pageant, and we see if you do a Christmas pageant or you imagine the Christmas story or you read about it, it's Matthew's stories combined with Luke's stories put into one big story. But if you actually read Matthew carefully and then Luke carefully, they tell completely different stories. And in places, their stories are at odds with each other. They contradict each other.
That's wrong. That is simply wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. When you read the stories, you should first read all of Luke, and then come back and read Matthew, because Luke talks about the story that occurred before everything happened with Gabriel, who appeared to Zechariah and shared the news about Elizabeth being pregnant with John the Baptist. And then we go to the Quirinius census, which was the first census, which probably occurred as 2 BC in the Pater Patria, and I've gone into that in other videos. But anyway, so right around 2 BC, Jesus was also born. And we also know that because King Herod, we had reported by Josephus that some events occurred with King Herod, and the events occurred in 1 BC when we had a big eclipse, and we also had the Passover and a bunch of events that Herod did. So in other words, Herod died in 1 BC, and so Jesus was born prior to that. So we have those going on. Then we have the birth of Jesus and the shepherds and the angels appearing. So the shepherds and the angels appeared. And then Jesus was presented in the temple by his parents following the procedure that had been directed to the Jews. So he was presented in the temple. And that's when Simeon told Mary that a soul would pierce her heart. And of course, it did when she was at the foot of the cross. Her whole life, she actually knew that the crucifixion was going to occur, according to many people in the tradition. Then they returned to Nazareth. Now, here's where Luke picks up. Luke starts talking about Joseph being concerned that Mary was pregnant and that he was going to quietly put her away because, of course, he was betrothed to Mary, and her being pregnant and him knowing it wasn't from him was a problem. But then in a dream, an angel of the Lord appeared to him and told him not to put her away because she had been overshadowed by the Holy Spirit. So then we get the story of the wise men coming in from the east. And the wise men show up. They followed a star. Within 2 years of when Jesus was born, these wise men show up. Okay, so we know it was within 2 years of when Jesus was born, which many early church fathers have indicated is somewhere around 2 or 3 BC. But anyway, so the wise men followed the star. They show up. They tell Herod that the king was born. And of course, Herod is extremely jealous, extremely worried. So he decides to have all the children under 2 slaughtered. Now, why did he pick under 2? Because the wise men told him the approximate time of when they saw the star. And then Mary and Joseph escaped to Egypt. So there are no conflicts. There are no predictions. The only way you get that is when you read it as a fundamentalist. You throw on a bunch of assumptions, and it's rather unfortunate, but that is what Dr. Bart Ehrman has done here. A very easy reading, casual reading without any hidden assumptions, like the assumption that it all had to occur at once and that the shepherds were there at the same time as the wise men. That's something that you do see in nativity scenes, but the nativity scenes don't accurately portray exactly what happened. So thank you so much for coming in here. I hope you like and subscribe this kind of video. Just remember, whether you eat, drink, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.